Did
the
we
most
know this?
secure.
I'm like, I don't think I knew this before now.
Yes. So when I looked at it, I was like, oh, that's so cool. Because my mom still calls me Takia Lynn. And I'm like,
Mm.
stop. So I want to start off this way. I want to start off with you just telling my audience who you are, just a little bio about who you are and things before we get started. So you have the floor. Just tell us a little bit about.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me in this space, Takia. So, a little bit about me. Funny story. So, Lynn is actually my middle name, and I've adopted it as my last name. After I went through a divorce, I was like, I don't really want to go back to my maiden name. So, Lynn just feels the most authentic. So, I now go by Tavina Lynn. But a little bit of a background about me. I would describe myself as a creative, a visionary, and a scientist. So my background is in chemistry. Did the whole like academic route, got a PhD in chemistry, worked in biopharma company for a couple years where I was designing drug molecules, right? So I get to play with molecules on a computer and tell the chemists like what to make in the lab. And I enjoyed it. And also it was, I felt creatively stunted. I didn't have that language at the time, but it wasn't super fulfilling. Like I love science and all the things that got me excited about science. I felt like I wasn't really doing that once like the higher up I went, right? It became much more rigid and carry out these tasks. This is the goal, right? It wasn't a whole lot of room for me to explore. And so also like growing up while academics was sort of my, I would say it was really my savior in a lot of ways in terms of or it was what grounded me and kept me focused in terms of like the community and the family dynamic that I grew up in. And so I also really loved to dance, right? Dance and step. And so always had this creative bug and also really loved chemistry. And so my journey really has been, I define myself as a redefined scientist. It's really merging that background in chemistry with my natural creative expression, right? And so this last few years has really been more about creatively expressing myself, writing, right? With like that's what resulted in the book that we're going to talk about. And really actually getting back in touch with dance. Like dance, I just started kind of like dancing out of nowhere. And so my journey has really been like I'm going to use my chemistry, my background to design a life that feels most authentic to me versus trying to fit in certain boxes because I really tried that and it didn't work for me. So that's like my bio or like
Your
an
bio.
introduction to me. Yeah.
I love what you said, a redefined scientist. So you're not taking away from that title. You're just saying, I'm just going to recreate it so that it fits me, so
Yes.
that the title fits who I am. I am who I am, the constant, the position or those titles are the variable. You know what I mean? Like it has to fit me and myself. I thought that was powerful. So I want to start off with, before we get into the questions, getting into what a friend of mine, I told you, had read the book. And I gave it to him because I wanted to get somebody to read it from a male's perspective, right? And I know I looked at it and I was like, oh, this is powerful, but I wanted someone else to read it for me. And I wanted to read some of the notes that he had and some of the questions that he said. First of all, he said page 83, which page 83, I don't know if you know your page number, your book's
I mean,
number
I
is
don't
probably
have
not,
it
but I
memorized.
know whenever I was ready. Yeah, so
I
page
have it memorized.
83 is
Go ahead.
your healing process. I'm sorry.
No. I'm go ahead. I was saying I didn't have it memorized, but I'm glad I clearly have the book near me so I can go to the page. Got you.
So page 83 is the which we're going to talk about it with some of the questions is the healing process and how it's not linear and how there's all different types of movement. And I like the fact that you put that in there twice in the book. So it's like a reminder, like, hey, you're reading this, stop for a second, understand that this is not a straight shot, and it goes all in different directions. And I think even with your words, you explain that. And he pointed that was so realistic to look at that. He also said that at page 85, which is your, I think it was your open conversation with your wound. He
Mm.
said that it made him cry, that he was actually in tears reading that part, which was true for me too. It was a very powerful thing to think about speaking. Now they say, you speak to your younger self and, have a conversation, but never talking to directly to that wound, and what would that wound say and how would they react. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, because I wanted to dive into that part as well, the open conversation. And in addition, he said, life is a dance. You had said that somewhere in the book, that life was a dance. And he said that, is that still something that is a saying for you? Is that still something that you say or that you believe in, that life is a dance after everything? And
Ooh,
you
I love
yeah.
like that's so juicy. So what's so funny is I want to give context that why that's even in the book. There was a night
Okay.
where um, I decided to take like a trip, right? I was in therapy exploring this whole idea of like what is self-love, and my therapist suggested that I explore like what are things that bring me pleasure, right? What are things that I like to do that's fun, that feels good. So I was like I love the beach, and it was like a holiday weekend coming up. So I booked a trip where I was just like in this little Airbnb near the water. Off in, I think it was like the Cape, yeah, in Massachusetts. So that night I wrote a song randomly, right? I was listening to lo-fi music and I wrote this song that's literally called Life is a Dance. It's not one of my most prized writings, but it just kind of came out. And so I never really thought about it. I never described life as a dance, or I don't recall myself saying that, but I absolutely think that it is a dance, right? And the choreography gets to do whatever it does, right? There, I can think of a time in my life where the choreography was very rigid, it was boxy, it was like I was repeating the same choreography over and over again, right? And my body was tense. You can think of like a really militant, kind of rigid choreography. And then there's this moment where the choreography becomes more flowy and fluid and more like expressive in a way that doesn't really even fit in a genre. It's almost like, what is she doing? She looks crazy. Right. And then there's moments where the choreography looks really beautiful and it looks like flowy. You could think of like a modern or a ballet dance piece. So I definitely, and I think the choreography is changing based on the life experiences, right? What is the context? What situations are we in? And then how are we experiencing life? So I definitely do. I feel like it definitely is a dance.
That's why I've always loved dance, because
Mm.
dance is the movement of your body. I think life, I love how you explained it. Life is a dance. Us moving our bodies to each song, the way that it moves, the way that you hear the music. It's just like you said, sometimes it's rigid, sometimes it flows, sometimes it's just your body. And sometimes you don't even need music. That's the thing. I
Yes.
dance right in the middle of my living room, no music, and I'm just in a zone. And that's the music. My dancing is my music. Or
Yes.
it is the life is the music. I wish I had better words to explain it. I'm sure you understand. I'm sure my listeners understand.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
um, but I also definitely love dance. So let's get into it. I have I guess the most important question about this book. So we're going to make sure that we say the title. So of course it's Tavina Lynn, Still in My Mother's Womb, a healing experience. And the best way I can explain this to and you can of course chime in, because the next question is, why did you write the book and things? When I read it, I felt like it was how's the best way to explain it? Like it was not an apology, not a, it was just, this is my journey, here it is. And then explaining what a mother is, right? So there was this part of it that you were talking about your mom, but then you talked about this other woman, which we'll get into as well, and how her effect on you and what she meant to you, and what is a mother, and what's the definition of a mom, and what is the difference, somebody who births you compared to somebody who is in your life, who is there for you, supportive, holds you down, like what does that actually mean? And is it bad for you to release that birth mother? Is it bad to say, hey, I love you, but I can't, just
Yeah.
like you do with other people. And we'll get into that more. But that's how I looked at the book, and it was very powerful because I have, when I was reading, I had a I have a very similar relationship with my mom, and there were a couple parts where it was like your mom will say, well, I'm your mother, and you're never going to get one like me, and I'm the only mother. And it's like, for a long time you think that, right? And then you try to get that connection because you're like, you're my only one, I'm never going to have another one, I need you,
Yeah.
right? But then I think as you get older, you're like, wait a second, I don't need you, I want you. And if you don't want me to, then that's okay. I
Yeah.
have other people who love me and who have that.
Yeah.
But I wanted to hear from you is, why did you decide to even write this book? Why did you sit down and decide? I want to.
Yeah. So I feel like this book chose me. Like
Mhm.
I have been writing throughout my life, but my writing was more academic, right? And there is this moment where I'm in San Diego, and so I have this woman, I call her my soror mama. We're in the same sorority, but she's like a mother to me. And whenever I go to San Diego, I always stay at her house. And so this is my first time staying with her. And I'm just super present, and a lot of emotions are coming up for me, right? I'm noticing, like, we went to another soror's house, and this Sora she has a daughter, and I'm watching like how she engages her daughter, and like her daughter and her father, like they have this really close, beautiful relationships. They're connecting deeply over Game of Thrones, right? So it's just like mundane things, but I'm really noticing it. It's like really loud, and a lot of emotions are coming up for me. I'm like, wow, this is so beautiful, this connection they have. And then I'm experiencing envy because I'm like, fuck, I always wanted that. And then I'm experiencing gratefulness because the Sora mom is treating me like her daughter, right? Like she prepared for my arrival. Whenever I go there, it's literally like my home. And so I'm so grateful. So I'm having all of these emotions, and I literally start writing. And I don't even know if the first piece that I wrote made it into the book. I'm not sure, but it was called Shatter. And I'm processing like all of these feelings. Like I'm grateful to be here staying with her. She feels like a mother to me, and yet I know she's not my mother, so I'm kind of upset about it. And I just started writing, and I didn't even know that this style of writing was in me. Like it was my first time really writing poems and things. And so at first I was really just writing for my own healing, my own processing. And especially as we moved into the shutdown, COVID just gave you all the time and space to be with your feelings, and for just wounds to be like, look at me, like just in your face, right? And so I was just writing for my own healing. I always knew that I was going to share, but I was like, nope, I might just get to keep this for myself. And then there was just a moment where I accepted, like, this feels like it should be shared with everyone else. And so early in the journey, maybe like at the halfway point, I actually reached out to my brother, who's an exceptional writer, and was like, hey, I have these writings that are coming out of me. I want to put it in a book project, but it's all over the place, right? Because I didn't set out to say I'm going to write this book. I was just writing. And it's like, I want to just keep writing, but I want us to go through it and see what kind of comes together. And
Mhm.
so it really was my journey has always been, I'm committed to my healing and my freedom. And the part of me when I'm grounded in love is like I get to share that with other people. Not saying to do it my way at all. It's just sharing it with them so that they can see a journey. And then my hope is that it sparks something in them to process and heal their own wounds, right? Whether it's For some people, it may spark a conversation with their mother. For others, they may be led to dance or whatever, however that expression comes out. So that's really
I, yeah, I'm sorry. I completely agree with you. I 100% agree with you. And I love that you said that the book and the journey was yours and it was you going through it and you didn't do it to necessarily bring anybody up or have them change their journey or this is the way that you should do it, but just here is my journey and hopefully it helps someone. So I did a speech a couple days ago and I said, and I was just pulled out my cards. I said, my business is a reflection of my self-love journey. My business, my cookie business, what I do is just a reflection. And if it helps someone, that's great. I'm not perfect, right? This is just my journey. This is just me going through my journey. And people who come to me and the podcast, people talking to me, it's for me, right? I'm selfishly doing this for me.
Yeah.
When I sat down and read this book was for me that I wanted to read it. I gave it to a friend because I said, wow, this is great healing. Maybe it'll help you. And I gave it to them, but it's selfish. It's very selfish for my healing. So I so understand that part. And that means so much, being able to heal yourself first before you help anyone else.
Yes. I love that you say that like it's selfish because selfish gets a bad rep. Like we should be actually more selfish. Really, our only business really is to master ourselves, right? And nobody else. And I feel like when we think about, especially when we're doing work where it's of service to humans in some form, we are always the first partaker. Like we're the first person that gets healed. We're our first client, right? Like we're always first before we share whatever that knowledge or experience or whatever it is that we're sharing. We're always the person that gets to experience it first.
Yep. And that's the whole reason why I started the podcast. I started this podcast because honestly, because there were a lot of questions I had about my self-love journey, and I didn't know where to get that information. And I didn't want to randomly go up to someone and say, hey, how did you do your self-love journey? Right. The podcast is kind of like a cover. It's like a cover to get information from some amazing women like yourself that are educated and specialized in certain fields that can help me on my self-love journey. But what I've learned is that through that, I'm also helping a lot of other women that are listening to the podcast through their self-love journey. And that's awesome. But it's really selfish. Like I said, it's really about me, but I'm happy they got help. Like that's how I feel. How I know that I would assume that you did a lot of healing through writing this book and a lot of things came up. And there was a part in the book that I really enjoyed. I know we talked about a couple of things, but one of the things that I loved was when you had that conversation with yourself. It's on page 31. And you talk to the self-righteous you, the teenage you, the little you, the higher self you, the annoyed you, the concerned you, and the high you. It was perfect. That was perfect, Tavina. I looked at that and I had to read that page like 10 times because that's truth, right? That is truth. That is what trauma looks like, though. And that's the issue is that you have all of them in your voice, all of them in your head, right?
Yeah.
And you're battling all of these voices. Right? The little me is saying like, what? Why? Why are we doing this? And then you have the other, that was like so beautiful. And I want to see like through this and through like stuff like that, how did you heal all of those voices, all of those voices or those parts of yourself? Have you healed them, or what are steps are you taking to heal them through writing this book? How did that help?
Yeah. So, and going back to that figure that you brought up where we talk about healing not being linear, this book, this is in this moment, I feel like my writing this book was me like just shining the light on how the wound has manifested within me, right? What or giving voice to like feelings that I didn't even know was there, right? Or situations that happened that it's like I still get to process. And so for me, my journey, it's always, or not always, I would say Since about 2020, when I first learned about parts work, right? And parts work being just this idea that there are different parts within us, right? We talk about our inner child. Our inner child is just one part. There are other parts of us that sometimes aren't even us. It's like our parents' voice. It's a part of us that's always trying to protect us. And I have a part that's a perfectionist, right, that wants to do everything has to be perfect before we move on anything. And writing this book was really me just shedding light on all of these parts and just allowing them to speak and be, right? Because what I find is that in trying to fit within the status quo, right, in whatever form we're talking about, right, whether it's that status quo of my family dynamic or relationships or my career, I quieted or suppressed a lot of parts of Tavina, right? It was really only like this one or two parts that's leading the show. And so my healing journey has really just been allowing myself to hear all of these parts, and then in that same breath, like connecting to, I call her my higher self, right? That's the part of me that's grounded, that's in alignment, that's connected to the universe, that really wants my best interest, has my best interest in mine and everyone else's. And I hear them, and then I connect from that place on like how to move or what to do. But it's a circus in there. And honestly, I don't know that I've healed all the parts. Really, it's just I've uncovered that, oh, there is a lot of parts. And those parts are still there. Like teenage Tavina, little Tavina is very much still in here, right? They don't just go away because I'm now 34 years old. Little Tavina is a huge force, right? That only recently I let her come out and play and lead. And I'm like, okay, you can have at it, right? And then I have to like let her know, all right, now is the time to take a break because I have to do this whole adulting thing. Right? So
So what does the little Tavina look like? What does that look like? In a day, what does that look like? And how does her traumas or her things come up? And what does that look like?
so
Walk
in
me through that.
my journey, little Tavina, it's really been allowing her to just run wild and explore. So I remember in a therapy session when I was talking about, how much I hated my job and what an ideal career would look like. And I was like, an ideal day for me would look like a kindergartner's, right? They learn in short spurts, right? They got like maybe 10, 15, 20-minute lessons. They take naps, they eat snacks, they play, right? And even when they're learning, it's still fun. They're free to explore, use their imagination. So, in a lot of ways, little Tavina is leading in terms of just my creative projects and what I'm doing, because she was super creative and super imaginative. And little Tavina is just, she just has all this joy. Like she will bust out and just start dancing in the middle of Target because that's what she feels like doing, right? Or or if anybody ever recommends, do y'all want to get ice cream? The answer is always yes for me, right? It is always a yes for ice cream.
Me
Because
too. Me too. Me too. Me too. Always. Always a yes.
yes,
Maybe my little Takia is the same way. Like yes,
yes,
absolutely yes to ice cream. I love
yes.
it.
So yeah, so she just
I
wants to play and run and just run wild and really just be free without trying to fit and do things a certain way. It's before I feel like all the conditioning and trauma and abuse and all of that tainted her. But it's me connecting to what did that free little Tabina look like?
I thought I was thinking about how we typically take that little version of ourselves, or when they say like the little Takia or that younger version of yourself, and it's almost like we want to protect it, and we want to protect that younger version of ourselves, and want to heal that younger. But you said little Tavina, letting little Tavina lead. Nobody thinks about that. Let's let our inner child just lead, just do what it's going to do. We don't have to protect her. We don't have to make or anything because she's already cool. She's safe because I'm here. My higher self is here, so we're good. So allowing that little version of herself just to be free, right? And I heard that in your book of I heard little Tavina in your book. I
Mhm.
heard her. not
Yeah.
just in that one page, but I heard her in the book, and I heard her leading in the book. And that was powerful because I heard every one of these voices that you wrote on here in the book, and allowing each one of those, um, and whatever it was, to the annoy Tavina, I heard that. I heard that whenever you were in there, you were talking about, it was like after, I didn't mark it, but it was like you were saying, you were basically, I believe it was at the end where you were just, it was a rant almost. It was like, this is me. Like, I am who I am. Like, you can't, that's the annoyed. Like, shut up. Like, I'm going to do me. And I heard every single part of it. And I loved how you let the book, for it to me was like, you let each one of those personalities, those people that were you, lead in this book.
Mm.
And your higher self was just watching, was just allowing. It was just allowing. And it just let every single, and I love that. That was one thing that I got from the book that I thought was so powerful. Now, I know that you wrote a lot in here about your birth mother. And I wanted to know, has she ever read the book? And what were her thoughts?
So to my knowledge, she has not read the book. We're not in conversation, so it's not something that I like share with her, like, hey, I wrote this book and it's inspired by
Mhm.
you. Um, so I don't know that she's read it. I have a feeling that
Yeah.
they will probably come, and we're just taking it a day at a time. We'll see how it goes. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel it. My relationship with my mom was very similar to this book. It was one of like, I'll give you a little transparent in this podcast. My mom was on drugs really bad when we were younger, and I witnessed a lot. I was young. I was When I got taken away from my mom, I think it was 6, but I witnessed a lot between the ages of like 4 to 6. Now, the things that I remember, because I was so young, maybe they're screwed up, maybe because I was little stuff, but there's some things that it was like, no, that was what it was,
Yeah.
as you get older. And my mom doesn't believe I've seen anything. She believes it was a perfect life.
No,
She wasn't on drugs that much. She wasn't that bad. She always kept her house clean, but I remember it differently. And one thing that a family member told me, whenever I was talking to them, they said something that really like started my self-love journey. And it was so crazy. They were like, you know, your mom said, like, she said that, but she was really a fiend. She was really out here. Like, and that hit me. I was like, whoa, what?
yeah,
Like, she was really out there. She was really doing it. And that hit me because I was like, oh wow. And this came from a person that I respect. And they came to me and I was like, wow, she was. Does
yeah,
she know that?
yeah,
Does she know that was how she was? Does she know what it was? So then I started living with my dad, and I got a whole different life living with my father. But then I ran away from my dad thinking I needed my mother.
mm,
So my dad provided stability and love and all of this, but I thought that I needed my mom.
yeah,
So I went back there, and a lot of the, neglect, I'll say, and things like that continued.
yeah,
And I am healing in my 30s. Began healing and being like, wait, that wasn't right.
yeah,
That wasn't good. Right. And I never had boundaries before. So when I turned about 35, I put my foot down and I said, I'm not. You will not do this to me anymore. I
yes,
don't need it. And one of the things that always came up was, oh, well, you were so young. Oh, well, you didn't remember correctly. Oh, whatever. But trauma lives in our body and we feel that.
yeah.
Like,
And
it's
that's what I'm
there.
saying. Even before, I wish people would stop saying like, "Oh, they were too young to remember." That is because even before you speak, because children can't speak, like they are sponges, and we say this, they're sponges the moment they're actually in your womb, right? Like if it is a lot of stuff happening, and while your mother's carrying you, she's in survival mode, you feel that before you even enter this space, right? So kids feel everything. They may not have language for it, they may not understand it, like like this is what happened and this is how it impacted me, but they feel it in their bodies. And that's what the healing is. It's like getting into your body and like figuring out where all that trauma lives. And that's a whole journey.
Work.
It is
It's a whole
work,
journey.
and I'm still in it, right? I was like, oh, I go back to my book now and read it. It's like, oh, my past self is writing this for my future self because right
Mm,
now, where I am in the healing, I need to read these words. And
I
it's,
feel that.
yeah, I mean, it is, and you're just uprooting it, right? And then we're not even going to get to the wounds that your mother carried and your grandmother carried, right? Because all of that is also in us.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, it's a lot. So I have no I don't speak to my mother as well. We don't have that relationship anymore. And when before that even happened, I had to really sit down and sit down with myself and say, if this woman, if I my aunt told me something. She said about my mom and my dad. She said, if you walk away from them and you never talk to them, you have to be okay with if they pass away, you not being there. And I had to sit with that for a minute because it was like as if like you can't be sad. If I'm not that you can't be sad, but you can't be mad that you didn't have life. Are you okay? Are you going to be okay if they pass away and you didn't have a relationship with them? And I had to sit down and think about that. And when I released my mother, and I say release, when it was like, I'm done with it, I'm creating these boundaries, I had to be okay with that. I had to sit down and be like, I have to be okay. For if something happens or things, I have to be okay with that because I can't allow that toxic energy into my space anymore. I
Yeah.
can't. But the one thing, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, 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 go ahead, go ahead, go ahead. Because I
The
have,
one thing,
I was asked the same, I was asked the same question. And to
Mhm.
be honest, that question was really enraging for me because
Mm,
to me, what's underneath it, it feels very fear-based and it
mm,
feels very like guilt-driven. Like
mhm,
if your mother passed and you want to fall apart, you still get to do that and you get to decide to not be in relationship with her
mhm.
because we're not in relationship with people because well when they die I want to say that I was think about how insane that sounds. We don't
Yeah.
think about that when we choose who we're in relationship with. It's like, how does this person make you feel today? Because that was my defining moment. It wasn't even about the shit that happened in childhood when I made the decision to discontinue. It was like where we are in the present moment, the abuse is still continuing. So now it was like a wake up call where it was like, oh, now Tavina, you're responsible. If you keep being in this relationship, you are now accountable, right?
Mhm,
So it's like, so now that you're an adult, now you get to make a decision. And so little
mhm,
Tavina, I didn't want her to go through that. She didn't want to go through that. And it's one thing if we're talking about healing taking place for both mother daughter individually and collectively. That's a beautiful thing. I think any relationship that's possible no matter what happened, right? But when it's still happening present day, that's when it's like you have to just treat them as any person. If the relationship is toxic, it's toxic. And it's even more intense when it's our mother because we keep giving them passes and it just keeps building on and it keeps re-triggering the shit from the childhood. Like it's like they're just constantly pressing on it. And then it's like the list of things to heal from just keeps piling up and piling up. And so it's
mhm.
like, no. And sometimes I think breaking generational curses of trauma is disconnecting from the family for however
Absolutely.
long it takes,
I agree.
however long it takes. And we
I
get to
agree a
decide.
thousand percent.
Yeah.
I agree 1,000% on that. And it doesn't mean forever
Yeah.
but it does definitely means that I'm going to do this boundary. I kind of began thinking of a mother and the definition of what a mother is differently when I told my story to another woman who I was very close that I consider a mother type. And she held me,
Mm.
right? So it was a very different experience.
Yeah.
Me saying, hey, this happened to me. Oh my God, I'm so hurt. And my mom saying, or my grandma saying, well, it happened to me.
Yeah.
And not being healing and not hearing me to a woman saying, wow, let me hold you, let me hug you. Are you okay?
Yeah.
How is that for you? Are you doing all right? That's like I was like, oh my God, people really do this?
Yeah.
They're really compassionate like this. But like for a long time, I was afraid to talk about my trauma because I was like, I'm a burden. I should just get over this. This is something I need to get over. Like, why am I still in this? Like, and that taught me so much. And I wanted, I asked about your mom reading the book. Did the woman who you described in the book that was not your mother, has she read your book?
Yeah, so interesting. I talk about all of my mothers actually in this
Yes.
book at some point.
Yes, you do.
And a few of them have read it, and I've had so thank you for this question because I'm like, I need to reach out and follow up with some folks. But I've had two beautiful conversations with two women that mother me. And one of my godmothers, our relationship is actually experiencing a lot of healing after as a result of her reading this.
Mm.
She came to my book launch, and at the end of the book launch, we allowed people to they could ask me questions, and some people just wanted to share. And she had read the book already, and a lot came up for her in terms of just how present I was when we met, because I described like our meeting for the first time. And we her and our relationship, we both have mothered each other. That's the interesting thing. Like, I call her my godmother. She's older than me, she's old enough to be my mother, but we have really taught each other new definitions of what mother is, right? And she
Mm.
shared that during the launch of how I've mothered her, and that's the first time I've ever heard a mother figure, right, share that I mothered them. I think that's a normal thing. I think in most parent child relationships, the children are absolutely parenting the parent if they are open and patient enough to receive that gift, right? And so, yeah, it's been healing to hear the other women that have mothered me, what their experience has been, right? I have one mother that she has mothered her own children, but she's never had a daughter. And she shared with me how she always wanted that experience, and how it was like a chemistry. It was the same way that I felt connected to her in that way, she naturally felt connected to me in that way. And so the conversations are still happening. I've been thinking about, I probably will do some type of Zoom or something that I'll share with people where I want to have like a conversation with all my mothers, right, after reading this book, and really talk about and unpack this whole idea of a mother, right? And it was a beautiful way for me to just express gratitude to them, right? Because these were all women that chose me and that I chose. And relationships are so that's what makes it so much more beautiful, because it was a choice. It was not an obligation for anybody. No one had to choose. Especially, we could have just been in a relationship, but to take on the role of like, or to say that you feel like a daughter, I'm going to mother you, right? That was all a choice.
What does that look like though? What does being mothered, or the definition of mother, what does that look like to you?
Yeah, so that's another thing that came as a result of writing this book. My definition of mother is really expanding. I see how my friends mother me and how I mother them. I think it's like it's nurturing, but nurturing to me doesn't even fully capture what a mother does, because when you're mothering, like, you're making magic happen when you're mothering, right? Yes, there are times where you're nurturing, you're teaching, you're loving unconditionally, right? Even when you fuck up or you do things and make bad decisions, quote unquote, because I don't believe there's bad decisions, but like, you're being loved unconditionally. You are being held, like you talked about. You're being listened to and heard, you're being seen. So, and all the women that have mothered me, they all really opened my eyes to different ways of mothering. No, none of them mother me in the same way. There are some of them that
Mm.
I've actually even felt frustration with, because I may have needed nurturing, but they showed up in a different way because that's their expression of mothering, right? And so it's been expanding my definition of mothering. And it's also like, man, it's opened my eyes to how much pressure we put on one woman that birth children to be all of these things to that child or
Mhm.
to those children. It's like, I really don't think one person should even have that pressure to do all of that.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah.
I've also noticed that too. And especially if the woman or your birth mother hasn't done that healing, right? So then they have a child, they haven't done their healing, and then you expect them to be a mother automatically. But then you realize, wait, they're still healing too. And you said something in your book about that, about understanding your mom. You said something, I understand. It was just that thing. She was talking about her wounds, and you said, I understand.
Yeah.
And I love that, because it was like you were telling your mom, like, I get it, but I still don't. Like, I'm still
Yeah.
not, but I get it. I get that you're healing. I understand. That's just like you would say to a friend though. Like,
Yeah.
I love you. I get that you're healing, but I can't be there
Yeah.
for your healing. I can't be present for your healing, because I need you as a mother. I need your mother. I need you to
Yeah.
be there for me, and you're not there yet. So that's one thing that I communicated to my mom, was that until you heal, until you begin that process, we can never have a conversation, because you can't even, we don't even speak the same language, right? So that just can't. There is power to me in the word mother. I think mother to me is just everything that you said. It's the compassion, it's the caring, it's the unconditional love, it's the holding you, it's the teaching. It's hard sometimes. I'm not saying, like, I think that when people think, oh, you don't have a mother, and I say, oh, I have other women in my life that hold a great position to me, I think they say stuff like, oh, well, nobody can be like your mother. And I'm like, what? Yeah, you're right. Your trauma, I agree. I probably can never do that. But it's like, I hope not, because these women have this way. They're not perfect. They piss me off.
Yeah.
Right? Sometimes they don't say greatest things. Sometimes I don't answer their phone calls because I'm like, no. It's a whole thing. But
Yeah.
the way that they love me,
Mhm.
the way that they love me authentically myself, the way that they love me even when I get mad and I don't answer their phone calls, the way that they love me is different, right? That my real mother will say something like, oh, well, you did this to me, so I'm not coming to your event.
Mm.
My godmother, or the woman in my life will say, you did this to me, that's why I'm coming to the event, so I can address it. Like, you're going to talk to me, like, that's the difference,
All right, we're
right?
gonna have a
Because
conversation after this
we're
event.
gonna have a conversation about this. Like, you know what I mean? Like, my birth mother would be like, well, I'm not talking to you today.
Yeah.
You pissed me off. The mothers that have adopted me are like, oh, you don't want to talk to me? I'm about to email you, text you, voice message you with everything. Oh no, you want to talk to me. Like, that's the difference between them
Yeah.
two, right? Do you feel that energy?
I
Do
know,
you
it's
get
a
that right?
very different energy. Yeah, it's a very different energy. And it's so beautiful that you get to like experience that, because what happens is whatever version of mothering we get, that's what we think mother is. And then you talk
Mhm.
to friends and then you experience, oh shit, there are other ways to do this. And then part of the healing, it's like the moment, the first step I feel like is you're gaslit. Like none other, because you're actually like, oh shit, that was not normal what I experienced. Wait, it might have been considered abuse. Like, I can remember a therapy session where I was about to go in on my therapist and I saw her back up because she just said the words so casually, and I wasn't ready. I was like, I didn't experience abuse growing up. Today I'm like, it was fucking all kind of abuse happening all up and through there, right? But that's that first step
Yeah.
of when you it's like the identification, it's the awareness that there is actually even a problem, right? And it's beautiful that in that we still get to experience um what we didn't experience, right, with other mothers. They get to, it's like, oh, this is novel to me, this is foreign, but I'm getting to experience it even though it comes in a different form.